Welcome to Making Disciples, Danielle Strickland. I am so pleased. We did a little interview like this years ago for our preaching school, and it went down so well. So I'm really pleased we can do this again.
Right.
Could you just tell us? You've started something. Last time we spoke, you worked for the Salvation Army.
hmm
You now lead something called the Boundless Project. Just give us a 30 seconds. What is that?
Yeah, basically there's three nonprofits. I speak and I teach and I write, and then there's three kind of nonprofits that I'm leading. One of them's called Infinitum.
Yeah.
.com, infinitumlife.com. And that's really about following Jesus. Very
Yeah.
similar to kind of this thing that you guys are venturing. Um, and then the other one is called Brave Global,
Yeah.
and it's about mobilizing churches to reach vulnerable girls before they're trafficked.
Yeah.
And then the other one's a thing called Amplify Peace, which is about raising up women peacemakers globally and also locally to make the peace.
Yeah.
hmm
That's
hmm
great.
Yeah.
Hey, so I heard you speak a little while ago about real discipleship.
hmm
And you actually were talking then about infinitum life. And you were
hmm
talking about what it means to be a real disciple rather than just somebody that turns up to church. Producing nice people.
hmm
Jesus never called us to be nice people. He called us to be rebels,
hmm
radicals who lived a new kingdom. So when I say to you, what is a real disciple? What is that for you? What does it mean to be a real living Jesus disciple?
I think that it's a daily practice. This is what I keep coming back to, even in my own life, is just daily practice. So I think what has happened is oftentimes we get caught in this, if I think the right way, or if I read the right thing,
Hmm.
or if I think the right thing. But actually, thinking is not how faith is
Hmm.
manifested. Doing is. Action
Yeah.
is like a practice. So even prayer, I can think about prayer all I want, but in the end, if I'm going to be praying, I'm going to need to pray. So for me, following Jesus in a big sense is actually a daily practice of things that help me hear God and know and recognize the invitation that He gives me on a daily basis to practice what I believe.
Hmm. So it's actually doing something. It's the activity of doing it.
Yeah, even prayer,
Yeah.
is an action, is something that I do. So like rather than just think, "Ooh, I should pray every day," I just book
Yeah.
time to pray. And
Yeah.
then I pray every day. And there's been a few tools that I've developed to help me. One tool that we practice, I do this daily prayer with Infinitum Life, and it's a posture prayer. So I do it with my body. This is really helpful on a practical level for prayer, especially, for people who are like me, perhaps that struggle with sitting still
Yeah.
or really, settling down and listening. Well, I'm not really a natural contemplative.
Yeah.
But actually learning that practice of sitting down and staying still and learning to listen, those are all really good for my activist life. But you can't learn that by theory. You have to learn that by practice. So I've used a couple podcasts. One is a daily prayer. I have a 10-minute guided prayer of this prayer that I use every day
Hmm.
on a podcast called Infinitum, if it's helpful to anybody. But it's this posture of surrender. So every day I reposture myself to say, I'm not in charge of this day. This is not
Hmm.
a day of my design. Like, God, you're in charge of this day and you're in charge of me. So please take charge today. So just even that like daily intention to say this day isn't mine
Yeah.
is a really great way to practice following Jesus today. So that again, this isn't a one-time decision I made to follow Jesus when I was 18 years old. This is today's decision that I made to follow Jesus for today. This has been super helpful for me. The other posture is a posture of generosity, which is I open my hands up and I say, I want to, like Jesus said to his disciples, freely you receive, so freely give. So I usually make a confession that my natural posture is to take and to keep and to hold. That's a closed-fisted culture, I call it. That's what we're taught. And so the counterculture to that is to open your hands, which is what Jesus says. Open your hands so that you can receive. And I usually say today, I need peace, forgiveness, grace. Usually I start with patience because by 8 o'clock in the morning, I have 3 sons and I'm pretty much out. So, and then what I do is I say all the stuff that I've received, mercy, I'm going to keep my hands open and my life open so that everything I've received, I will give today.
Mm.
So this also helps reposition. It's not out of me. I'm not giving out of what I have. I'm giving out of what I've been freely given. So all of these kingdom resources, like when Jesus is talking about forgiveness and grace and like mercy, and those are all kingdom, those are all things we've all received. And if you think you're just mustering up that on a daily basis to try to live like Jesus lived without receiving that on a daily basis, you're deluding yourself. You're going to run out of that stuff in a quick hurry. So that's generosity. And then the third thing is mission, or what I like to call these days engagement.
Yeah.
And I make this confession that my natural posture is to disengage. And actually the natural cultural posture is to disengage because it's too hard. It's too complicated. Those people are too needy. This issue's too big. And it creates this disengaged, cynical paralysis. And so I say, I literally open up my arms and I say, I'm saying to the world, to the needs, to the issues, to the people, to the lost, to the last, to the least, I am engaged. I'm at your disposal. I want to be involved. And then that's my intention set for the day. And then during the day, I literally just am becoming more aware of God's invitation on a daily basis to stay in that posture. So there'll be an issue that might arise and I'll get ticked off. And then I'll remember, wait a minute, this isn't my day. This isn't my issue. This is God's day. This is God's issue. And then it's a matter of acting that posture, reminding myself that that's the posture I chose for today. So just for today, I'm going to live surrendered and make this God's problem instead of mine. Yeah. And likewise, there's somebody that's asking for something and I'm like, oh, my natural posture is to like grudgingly, I can't, it's too much. I don't. And God will be like, I thought today you were going to practice being generous with your life. Whether that's money or whether that's time or whether that's, resource, whatever. So anyway, this practice of a daily decision in the morning, an intention, and then just paying attention to where God's inviting me to practice all throughout the day has been really revolutionary. And what I've discovered is that if you practice living like Jesus, you end up living like Jesus. It's the weirdest thing.
So you've just used the word surrender.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the key word, isn't it? The difference between somebody that consumes from Jesus, they're a crowd, they like the teaching of Jesus, they're turning up to a local church, but that's all you've got. That they're living a spiritual life, but they're not living a discipled life. The difference is surrender. I say, Mark 8, pick up your cross, follow me, die to yourself.
And that it's the death to self. Like again, we keep one of our problems is we're kind of recovering from a very super spiritualized faith. So we have a whole generation that thinks faith is knowledge, and that it's super spiritual. Like, how's your spiritual life? As though the rest of your life is some other thing.
Yeah.
Or that you could even have a prayer time with God, and then the rest of your life be separate from that prayer time. And I think. It's not that we don't want a prayer time, because that's the other extreme, is that everything's prayer. You're like, well, whatever. But like you want a prayer time, but you want a posture that says, I want my whole life to be a whole life of, I want my whole life. Everything is spiritual. I want my whole life to be an active part of it. And this is Jesus when he says, come follow me, which is that, die to yourself and your own interest and come follow me. It's a whole life invitation. It's not just come follow me with the way that you work. Come follow me with the way you talk to your colleagues. Come follow me with the way you parent. Come follow me with the way you engage with issues of the world. Come follow me as we head to the margins and live it's a whole life decision. Yeah.
So one of the things that's happened in the church is we've made faith such a cerebral activity. Come and hear the sermon. We're all learning to be university theologians, and you can't get involved with ministry until you know enough. And that means then that it's all about learning the knowledge, but it never then activates anything in our hearts. Our hearts then don't become aligned. We don't become passionate about the things that Jesus is passionate about, which means we never then activate it in the way that we start to live it out. And consumers love the head knowledge, but they don't want to use their hands to actually get dirty in the world. So I'd love to ask you a question. One of the things that you speak a lot about, and it's not just about speaking about, it's what you live and breathe, is having a life where you are living out the gospel with your hands. A lot of your stories are stories of you reaching out, becoming the hands of Christ in the world, and actually engaging with those on the edges. What was it for you? And you're not allowed to just say, well, it's always been there, or you're not allowed to say, well, it's the Salvation Army, so it's been a part of my culture. What was it for you that moved faith from being a historian towards Jesus? You hear about Jesus, you know Jesus, moving it to a place you're living and breathing and activating the stuff. What shifted it for you?
Yeah, I remember very clearly being on a mission trip in Africa, and I was part of an organization, like interdenominational organization, that was super strict. And I was, I had worked literally every free time of the entire summer working off these things they called special blessings. You got to, if you were not listening to the rules. Anyway, I had one day, I finally just gave in and did what they suggested, which was on that day, you had to tell somebody else about Jesus. And they gave you this like little tract. And I remember going through the tract with somebody, and just really like going through this track, and like I call it the world's worst gospel presentation, And this woman, this girl named Fatima, who was gracious enough to say, okay, fine, tell me, And at the end, I remember saying, would you like to follow Jesus? And she said, yeah, I really would. And I remember saying, like, I don't think you understood this. And I went back to the beginning. And then I made her do it like 3 or 4 times before I would finally let her get saved. And then the next day when I was reading my Bible, because I had to, I remember just like kind of just weeping. And I realized that I knew that God could save anyone. Like I because he had saved me, I knew that it was possible for him to save anything. But I had not realized until that day that God could use me to save somebody. And as soon as I realized that this Christian faith was not just about me getting free from something, but me getting free for something, that's what changed everything for me. So that changed the trajectory of my whole entire life, because I was like, if God could use me to help somebody else, like if God could use my salvation to help someone else get saved, if God could use my freedom to help, then let's do this thing. And I went from, this consumer based, which I really think that moment was a salvation of sorts from my own, my faith being me at the center. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what activated, probably a true essence of what Jesus is saying when he says, come follow me.
Yeah. So if someone's watching this, and I love that phrase that you just used, I have to write it down. We're in the center. We're in the center of our faith, and it all orientates around me. So we make decisions about what worship songs we like and what church makes us feel good. And then when we think this church isn't giving me anything anymore, we move on to the next church to consume from. Somebody watching this looks at themselves and says, yeah, do you know what? I think that's where I am. That's where I'm at, but I don't want to be there. I want more than that. What would be those first steps that you would say, look, if you want to move into a deeper apprenticeship to Jesus, a deeper discipleship of Jesus, what would you say they need to start? It's not about what they're doing, because that's more doing, but what needs to be those steps for them where they can actually start moving in being a disciple rather than being a consumer?
Yeah, I think just out of my own experience, so this daily intention, I think we come full circle back to surrender, where your faith and your life doesn't rotate around you. And I do want to say, though, that like even all these years of doing this, like it is tricky business. It is hard. Our narcissistic sense of life is, rife and raging. So that's why I keep emphasizing this daily intention, this daily prayer, this daily practice. And for me, I would say that getting out of myself. So there's a little question that I ask myself a lot these days, and it's this: how could I be of service? So whatever the circumstances, so this would be a helpful thing to get out of your own, what's in it for me, which is the number one question of our dominant culture. Why would I bother? What's in it for me? And sometimes we even sort of suggest that serving the poor is good for you, which, by the way, it would be. But actually, the better question is, how can I serve? Like, how could I be of service in the situation? How do I serve the needs of my colleague who's in a crisis? How do I serve Christ in the situation? So it's just a bit of a posture shift. Yeah, and there's a beautiful Thomas Merton prayer. I don't know if you come across that, but it says like, I don't even know if I'm getting this right, but I think the desire to get it right is pleasing to you, God, which I think is a really beautiful, because another thing we're really good at, Christians, is just really being hard on ourselves for not getting it right. And I think there's a real sense in which your desire to get it right, which again comes back to this language around practice, is like just your desire to get it right is pleasing God. And that as you try and as you practice and you get it right some days and you're going to get it wrong some days, you're going to get it right some days. As you do that, that's going to be pleasing to God. That's what discipleship is. Yeah.
It's like the prayer that we say, Lord, I want to love you, but at the moment I don't know if I am, but I want to love you.
Right.
I want to love you. And actually sometimes just the prayer of God, I want to love you, but I'm not there yet, but I want to, is almost more powerful than the one that says, I love you. Because it's that desire of, I know I'm not there, but I really want to get there. And it's the same kind of prayer, isn't it?
And with the conclusion that God's pleased with that prayer. It's not like a cheesy get you off the hook prayer. It's a legitimate grace-filled prayer. Like even the desire to want to please God pleases God. So, yeah.
If you were honest, are there moments where you look at your own life and say, gosh, I've actually drifted off. I'm no longer being the disciple that I wanted to be. Are there moments where it's almost like a light comes on for you as there's a deeper layer, there's another level of surrender? Because people often see those that speak on stage and say, oh, you've got it sorted. You don't know where you're nothing like me. But the reality is, just because we're on a stage doesn't actually mean absolute squat. But are there moments for you where in recent years where you've said, "Gosh, I've missed it. There's more, and I haven't done that yet."
Yeah, I think there's daily moments of that. I think I miss it all the time. And one of the other practices that I really love doing is the examen at the end of the day. So when I'm lying in bed in whatever hotel room I'm at or at home. Just going through the day and looking for moments where God was gracious and inviting me in, and places where I missed it at the time but see it now. And, I'm trying to condition myself that the more I intentionally see from that angle, the more I'm going to see it in the moment instead of missing it in the moment. I would say absolutely. And actually the whole premise of starting this infinitum journey that we've been on was that conversation with a few of us that have been leaders for 25 years, lots of us in grassroots, like really difficult circumstances. And you would look at our life and say, wow, like those people are, dying and following Jesus. But we had this real conversation. It's like, are we really following Jesus, or are we just doing what we do and what we've been doing for some time? And so that lack of freshness, that lack of faith, or that lack of even risk sometimes when you just do what's comfortable to you, and that becomes your norm. So sometimes even faith isn't even about a specific, so me working at the margins, like that's my normal, that's my comfort. So you really want to throw my faith into it, Tizzy, have me work, I don't know, speaking to suburban mega churches in America, which is what I'm doing primarily right now. So that's like, what is this? That's where I get into my crisis of faith, where I'm seeing God leading me, and I'm trying to be obedient to him and trying to be grace-filled and really being challenged to love people that I previously have judged. So, so for me, it's the opposite. I'm going in the opposite trajectory of most people, but I feel like whatever it is that God's inviting you to, that's discipleship, is to say, okay, I'm going to work my way to follow Jesus on a daily basis and in the direction he's calling me to, not in the direction I think I should go or what so-and-so is doing or this person's life, but in what Jesus is inviting me to do.
Hey, that's a great place to land. So thank you so much. I think the way that you articulate your faith, the way that you articulate your love for Jesus, the way that you follow Jesus, it inspires a lot of people. And the reality is we get invited to speak because we inspire. But sometimes actually it's the cold face where we're most alive. But then sometimes to get people on the cold face, you have to go and wake them up to then get them to come, don't they? So thank you. Really,
I was also going to say the difference between gifting and character, and just how, someone can be a fantastic speaker and still lacking in character. And those two things can go together. That's not, I think we're all like, hypocrite, hypocrite. I mean, everybody's a hypocrite, right? So it's just about matching your gifting with your character. That's the discipleship journey, right? But yeah.
Bless you. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Cris. Bless you too, man.
And,
I hope your future is fantastic catalyst for discipleship.
Yeah, we hope so too. Bless you. Thank you for your time, and hopefully catch up with you again some point in the future. Bless you. Bye-bye.